Welcome to the Voices of a Stranger podcast. Here is your host, Reza Garajadaki.
Episode of The Voices of a Stranger. I'm your host, Reza Garajadaki. I'm super excited today because we have an incredible speaker and author who's going to share with you a pretty remarkable story about his life and all of the things that happened to him. So I want to welcome our guest, Coach Stefan Rudolph. Hi, Coach. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, Reza. I really appreciate you having me on your show. It's been great to see you taking the next step in life and helping others, interviewing me and so many other people out there to get the message of hope and passion out there and what I call life after lockdown, right? So
Correct.
you're a big part of it.
Thank you. And I love the fact that you're outside. You know, when we spoke, you said, Reza, I love to do my interviews outside. You love to be in nature. I know you played racquetball this morning, so you're busy, but I really appreciate you taking the time to come meet with me. So listen, this is all about you. So I'm going to stop talking. Tell our audience about your life story and why I invited you to be a guest on The Voices of a Stranger.
Yeah, Reza, I appreciate it again because you're bringing people together with the stories like this, like I've had in what I call life after lockdown, and helping other people inspire them, because I went through a 14-year lockdown, I call it, with epilepsy, with alcoholism, with addiction, with escapism overall. And so now I've had my calling over about 7 years ago. I knew I kind of found my path in life to complete my life in a way of like ending one life and starting another by helping others know that they're not alone. And I've just recently published my second book out here. I brought a copy to show you because it might look familiar with that background right here.
Yeah.
This is Lake Hodges. I'm in Escondido, California, in North County. I think that's the same mountain actually right there.
Yeah.
And I took that picture just about 7 years ago as well. And a lot of my story is called the 7-year shift. I'm putting this down here, but I call it every 5 to 7 years, we shift in life, we grow in life, we change in life. People may be familiar with the 7-year itch in marriage, right? They call that. But I noticed in my life and what I changed through and grew through in my 11 years of sobriety now, it didn't have to do with physically getting better from alcohol. It had to do with mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and combining those areas to accept change, accept challenge, and accept growth. And I have a quote that says, change is in challenge. And if you look at that word challenge, the first three letters, change. So that part is part of challenge. And I started writing over probably 20 years ago. The only 2 A's I got in college were in my writing classes. Everything else in my college days was beer, was partying, was fun, was alcohol. And I had a very successful life, and it led me down a path later, though, of alcoholism, of addiction, of escapism. And even though my writing was involved, I had a passion, but I felt I can't follow this. I want to make money. And the way I help others is find your passion in life, especially with these kids that have gone through lockdown. They might have a calling from their parents or from their family, or even, with them to go to college, to get a degree. And I did those steps in life, and I'm proud that I did that. I would never change anything, but I got the college degree. I married my high school girlfriend. I got the pharmaceutical sales job, like the 6-figure income. I had it all. And at one point, from a 7-year time period, ironically, from 1996 to 2003, I had the 6 figures. I had the $1 million home in Anaheim. I had everything in life, but I wasn't happy in here. It was the heart of passion and the mind of action that I needed to connect the dots of thought with, and I couldn't do it. In between, I said, is a mouthful of excuses. So what I in my coaching program to this day, what I learned back then was my passion was here in my heart. And what I didn't have, though, was the action. I had a lot of excuses like, I don't want to change. I need to make money. I need to grow. I need to do what society's told me to do. College degree, white picket fence, perfect life, for everything. But guess what? The alcohol never stopped. Now, Reza, what they say too in alcoholism, if you're familiar, or Alcoholics Anonymous, but everything was focused around alcohol, and I never gave up. And they say when you start drinking, you stop growing. So I was literally the mind of a 16-year-old in some ways when I started drinking, but I was 32, exactly half my life went by, and everything was success on the outside, but I wasn't happy on the inside. A lot of my program talks about this and helping people take certain steps in life to start over, to accept change, accept challenge. But at that point in life, at 32, I couldn't do it. I was in the pharmaceutical sales, but guess what? I got my first DUI in 2002. I was out partying, thinking I was invincible, and I got pulled over one night, and I wasn't wasted, but I was very arrogant and cocky to the sheriff up in Sacramento here and in California. And we said that he said, I don't want to hear this. I don't care who you're with. I don't care who you work for, what you're doing. I blew a .10, and in California, it's a .08 at the time. They lowered it.
Right.
So I thought, I'm okay, but I wasn't. Guess what? 6 months later, I lost my job. A year later, I lost my marriage. And 2 years later, I started having seizures again. And I left this part out so far, but I did have an epilepsy issue in when I was 16 in football in high school, I received a traumatic brain injury. So here I am as an alcoholic epileptic my whole life, taking medication, functioning in life. But when everything fell apart that time with my DUI, I started having seizures again. And so I'm also helping people now with epilepsy because I've been down that road and done that. That year in from 2002 to 2005, I had 2 epileptic car accidents, a DUI, grand mal seizures at work. I lost 2 jobs because of my seizures. Everything, again, 6 figures, $1 million home. 3 years later, living with my parents at 34 years old. So It was very traumatic where I see why people and how people could commit suicide. I was never like that in the way of like killing myself. But guess what? Alcohol is killing yourself. It was a slow suicide that I never stopped. And by the time I was 34 years old, I received my second DUI because that day, there was one day in my life that changed my life forever that I wrote a book about now. And that was when I had 2 seizures in one day, and I was in the hospital 3 times, and I ended up totaling my stepdad's vehicle that night. So like my whole life collapsed because I knew I was going to lose my job again because I had a seizure that morning. My dad picks me up at the hospital, takes me back. I have a seizure in his car. We finally get back home to his place, and I just said, screw it, I need a drink. And I was under so much medication back then. When I had 1 beer, I blacked out, and I woke up in his Mazda RX car, whatever sports car it was back in the day. And I'm traveling down the city of Petaluma in Santa Rosa area, and I'm going to a casino. I had no idea why I was doing it, but I had 2 seizures that day, medication, and guess what? I totaled his car. I nearly killed myself. So it was a slow suicide that ended that night. And that's where I wrote the book about it. My book picks up right at that night on the curb. I literally had to fight my way out of the car that was all smoke, everything. I could have died by the fumes in the car. But when I got on the curb, I said, thank you. And that's what this book is about itself, is thank you to the 1000th power, is an attitude of gratitude and being thankful for every moment of every day that things happen in life. And back then I started writing a few things, and I had this vision, I had this dream. I was like, I'm going to write a book, and I wanted to do this. Originally I called it Barstool Knowledge. So, I still have that in my pipeline to write, but this came out more predominantly later. But that night in 2005 is where it began. So a lot of my story is steps to take that will change and help you with an attitude of gratitude, even in the negative. So divorce, jail, homelessness, bankruptcy, brain surgery. 2 years later, I had brain surgery, and I was very, accepting that night in 2005 of the DUI, of the accident. I literally almost got arrested for a stolen vehicle because I stole my stepdad's vehicle, driving on a suspended license, epilepsy, DUI. Even though I had 1 beer, I only had a .03. I was under all this medication from the hospital that day. So they were going to write me up. And in the end, I have these steps that I work on in this book, but this is kind of a funny thing, but it's realistic. I say, turn the FUs to thank yous. And I have a quote because people were just like, I was just F this, F that. I didn't want to pay attention. I blamed everybody. I had 1 finger pointed out and I had 3 fingers pointed in. I learned from another author. So a lot of it came from having to accept my challenges, accept my changes, accept my mistakes. And I help people in my coaching program do that. Now, from that time in the DUI, I was sober till 2007. I had brain surgery on May 9th, 2007. So I was good. You can't tell because I got my hair.
So what triggered the brain surgery? Where did that come from?
Well, that's a good question because the doctor told me I was going to a neurologist still because of the seizures in 2005. And they said, of course, what do you think? You can't drink. You shouldn't drink. And I was like, okay. Because every medication I had, and for those listeners out there, maybe you might be familiar with medications like Tegretol, Topamax, Depakote, Keppra, Lamictal. I can go on and on about anti-seizure medications, and they all say the same thing: do not mix with alcohol. But you can't tell an alcoholic that. I mean, for a while, The one thing that scared me straight was the neurologist after this accident said, if you drink again, you will not be a candidate for brain surgery. So in order to get my license back and my life back, or I'd be living with my parents the rest of my life, I had to accept that and change. Now, sometimes it's hard because people around you drink, and all the friends and people around me at the time were drinking.
Right.
And I couldn't do it anymore. So I had a very lonely life. But guess what? That's when I started writing more. And I found out.
Let me ask you this. You had this amazing life living in Anaheim. You got a beautiful wife, house, living the rich life. And the people around you were, how do you start eliminating, your village, which is kind of supporting your lifestyle, right?
The one relationship I had that lasted the longest, even beyond my marriage, was a 25-year relationship in my life with alcohol. So that became my best friend. If you didn't drink, I wasn't around you. It's kind of like sick in a sad way, but the normal life, the successful life that was celebrated by alcohol turned into a tragic life that was devoured by alcohol. And I escaped from alcohol. And that slowly, the marriage just drifted apart. It wasn't anything bad. We just took a break, and I got divorce papers 6 months later. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm free now. I'm single for the first time in my adulthood. And I went out and, quote, partied, but those parties turned to idiotic decisions of drinking and driving. And then the friends I did have that were either health conscious or, in the business world, they slowly dwindled away. And, it's a great question you asked, Reza, because when I think about it, I didn't really care. And what alcohol is, and then what I help people with, is a fuel of narcissism. It fuels a lot of selfish decisions, a lot of blaming other people. She did this, he did this. I wouldn't be here if this didn't happen. This person did this. A lot of blamingism, I call it. So the blamingism that went out, I finally had to face it in order to erase it, I call it.
Got it.
And at that point in 2005, as I was mentioning, I was sober. May 9th, 2007, the brain surgery. Guess what? 3 months later, I'm better, I think. And so I started drinking again. And February 2008, I got my third DUI in 6 years. And I'm sitting there in AA meetings and DUI classes going, I think I have a problem. I was never in denial of having a problem. I mean, I knew I was an alcoholic, but the way alcoholism works is you think you can function, you can do this job better, or I can handle it. At the end of the day, got to reward myself. So bars were a part of my life. I was very social alcoholic, meaning that I had to go out. I couldn't just drink at home. That didn't make any sense to me. So the third DUI happens in 2008. The seizures return in 2009. I'm trying to stay healthy. I'm playing racquetball. I'm getting fit, but I'm drinking at night, and I have seizures. So Reza, what do you think I gave up? Either the fitness or the alcohol? I gave up the fitness. And in a weird, ironic way, if I didn't mix up my life like this, because I was having seizures, if I tried to get healthy, I seriously cracked my head open at the gym, in the locker room. I had a seizure. I had a seizure in the racquetball court. I had a seizure at 2 different racquetball courts here in North County, and it wouldn't stop. It was the insanity, and I just chose alcohol. And finally, when I drank a lot, seriously, 5, 6, 7 days a week, my system would not have seizures. It's really odd, but if I got off of it, DTs, maybe you're familiar, delirium tremors, coming off, shaking, and then that's when people, even that don't have epilepsy, have seizures. So part of it is a profound epiphany for me now to see how bad I was then. I was horrible and drank for the next 3 years, had a successful life again financially, but just wretched physically, mentally, emotionally, and ended up in jail for my 4th DUI in 10 and a half years. And part of it came to me, and I knew that if I had that in 10 years, I would have been in prison. So there's a difference for the listeners out there that don't know prison and jail. I was facing prison time in jail, and luckily I had a good attorney. I spent 6 weeks there, exactly 42 days, got putting my goals together, praying, everything, just changing my life. I call it the holy shift. Because it was
how does it feel when you're in jail? I mean, if you're now, you obviously have to be sober, so it hits you like a brick wall, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a great point, because you know what? I thought, I'm going to stay here. And some people don't believe this. This is God honest truth. I was there, and I could have bailed out for $2,500. They say pay 10%. And I had $250, and I said, I need to be here. If I go out, I knew I was going to drink that night. So I stayed in there, and they ran my record. And 3 days later, they go, you have a $75,000 bail. And I didn't have $7,500 on me, so I couldn't get out. So I was stuck, and I go, what did I do? Oh, my God, now I wanted to get out because I was sober a few days, and I wanted to drink. They had to put me on medication because I was having the shakes. I was a mess. But I said, thank you. And I said, thank you, God. I need to be here. I need to experience this. And I'll tell you, the level of racism in jail, I was segregated into the white community. They had blacks,
Sure.
browns, others. They had everything. It was insane to see that I was a wood. It's called, they call you a wood, and you got to be with the woods and the blacks over here. And it was just like, I was in there for 6 weeks going, what did I do?
God.
And they shaved my head because they just say, well, here's your haircut. And I had a big, huge brain surgery scar right here. So
Oh, my
people thought I
God.
was like some weirdo, like, oh my God, look at that guy's head.
Yeah.
And I didn't drink, but here's a good point. The first time I turned down alcohol was in jail. They fermented fruit. They would come around and collect the fruit all throughout the week and then put it in a big trash bag and then go around every Saturday night before the cleaning day on Sunday and drink wine. And they gave it to me one day and I said, I can't drink. And they go, come on, man, come on, be a bro. I have epilepsy and I'm going to have a seizure. I should have said that 20 years ago. I should have been saying that my whole life and I would have never drank. And when they looked at me, epilepsy, seizure, whoa, he got scared. And I remember he walked off with his little wine bag. And I was like, okay, there we go. And it wasn't that easy again. But ironically, 42 days later, I sat there and did the math in jail later, in jail, but then did the figures later. 42 days times 24 hours is 1,008. I was in there 1,000 hours, probably 4 hours of processing, 4 hours to get out. I was in exactly 1,000 hours of my life spent in jail. And when I got out, I had an ankle bracelet and I couldn't drink. And I didn't tell anybody in jail about my medication. I didn't tell them about my seizures. I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I'll have to add this little asterisk in there. I'm not a doctor. I don't have a cure for epilepsy. But in here, connected with here in my heart, I said, I'm done being done. I'm not drinking. I'm seizure free. I meditated. I prayed. I did meditation, awareness, and prayer, MAP. So meditation and manifestation, awareness and attitude, prayer and positive thinking. And it shifted my life. I call it the holy shift because I was out of there and I didn't want to be around it anymore. And I was still going to the bars with an ankle bracelet on, with the friends, so-called friends I had, but I was drinking club soda. And I'm drinking it and I'm looking how stupid everybody is around me and just getting in fights and, their life. So I just said, I need to stop. And they still wanted me to drink, by the way. And I was just like, I'm not drinking. That's it. I'm done. So for the next year, it was horrific because I had to ride my bike at 40 years old. I was semi-homeless, but living in an RV in a van down by the river, I call it, with Chris Farley.
Yeah.
And I was like, that guy that I made fun of from Saturday Night Live is who I began to be. I'm living in a van down by the river. I'm a life coach, just like Chris Farley was saying.
Yes.
And I wanted to help others, though. So it was my passion. I went back to church. I got my life coaching, recovery coaching credentials. I went to classes. Over the next 3 years, it was an amazing shift where it was kind of lonely, but I was writing books. I didn't want to be around the negative energy. For your listeners out there who have gone through addiction, escapism, and now lockdown, that's everybody. That little lockdown time that we had in 2020, 2021 was an experience of what I went through for 14 years with alcohol and 14 years with epilepsy and seizures. And finally, I just got off medication, got off alcohol, everything stopped, got better, and I'm cured. And I just say, well, God's there, I'm here, it's all connected. And what I say is control, delete, reset your mind, reset your life. And part of this book, to me, anytime that I open it up or I listen to it, it's on Audible, it's on Spotify. I can just pick out.
We'll share with
anything,
people. Let me ask you this, Coach. Now, are you out of the pharmaceutical world during this time when you're getting sober? I know you said you live with your parents. What were you doing? How were you making money?
Well, back then in 2000, that's another good question. 2002, the six figures was there. The DUI happens. By 2003, I had lost my job. In 2005, I was going to inside sales. I was going to like Wells Fargo and working in insurance and sales and doing things over the phone because I had to get a ride to work. And for 3 years, I still was playing stupid and trying to drive to work. And when in Sacramento, I had a 4-car collision that I woke up to a breathalyzer in 2004, and I wasn't drunk, but I was hungover like one Monday late. I didn't get enough sleep during the weekend. And the sheriff back then, 0.00, but I said, oh, I have epilepsy. It's not a DUI. He goes, that's worse than 5 DUIs. You're never getting your license back.
Yeah.
So what you're asking about there, like everything was in the corporate world, and I wanted to go back to make this money. But every time I got back, the alcohol, the epilepsy, a combination of just things led me to getting less and less money and making less money and not being happy. So I just ended up ruining my life over those 3 years. And then, even though I thought I wanted to be single, it was the worst decision at the time to, try to just take a break. That ends in divorce, and that's, hopefully that answered that question, but that's kind of where
Yeah.
I ended up. Never got back into pharmaceutical sales and
Okay.
wouldn't
Yep.
do it to this day. I'm more holistic. I'm
Right.
natural, never been on drugs ever since, just took a different path. So it was like the pharmaceutical career, the money was there, but the happiness wasn't overall.
Let me
So
ask you
just,
another question. So
yeah,
a lot of people, they go and get help. They go into, you did AA. Sometimes people checking themselves into recovery places like Betty Ford or, you know, were you in any kind of counseling, or were you kind of, because I mean, I can just imagine doing this by yourself is very hard. How did you, I mean, like, manage all this?
well, part of it was AA, and I do highly recommend it. I went to meetings a lot, and then the first
Okay.
DUI, I had to go to meetings. Second DUI, I
Sure.
kind of knew I had a problem, but I still had to go to meetings. By the third DUI and the seizure epileptic, the car accident, I was awoke to the point where I was just knew I had to get help. And I was going once, twice a day. I had a sponsor. I did 90 meetings in 90 days. Knew I was an alcoholic. It was hard because the living environment I was around, there was alcohol too. But I just said I have to face it in order to erase it. And then by the fourth DUI later, I was all in to AA. And I did that for about 5 years, 3 to 4 or 5 year period. But I've shifted to the coaching is my passion and the speaking is my
Okay.
passion. And I'm just done. I mean, I've seen it in my life. It's still around me in my life and in other areas, but it makes me sick and it would never be even an option. If people ask me, I said, I would never put water in my car and I would never fuel myself with alcohol. Alcohol goes in your car. If you fill your engine with water, it's going to seize, right? So I have that analogy, but I just can't see myself in life ever drinking again. It's not even an option. It makes me sick,
Well, yeah.
So
At this
helping
point,
others, helping others is my passion now.
Let me ask you this. For those of us who are not involved with AA, there's a lot of listeners. Tell me in your words, why do you think? Because a lot of people go to AA, like you said, the first couple times, the court made you go because you had to go, but then
Yeah.
eventually you embraced it. So for those of us, our listeners who are listening, maybe they have a family member or a friend or someone in their lives, or even themselves thinking about maybe going to AA. I've never been to AA, so as an outsider, why do you think AA works so well in these situations?
Well, another good question, because step one is admit you're powerless over alcohol and that your life has become unmanageable. There's 12 steps, and I go to Celebrate Recovery now, which is a 12-step church program that's very similar to
Sure.
AA, but addiction. But AA works if you work it. That's their quote. So I would recommend you do go to a meeting, to go to an open meeting, it's called. That means anybody can attend, and make sure it's a speaker meeting. And you'll hear
Sure.
a presentation like me talking about the 12 steps. And that first step is key. When people, I saw one lady, I'll never forget, in a DUI class, she had 4 DUIs when I had 2. And I was always like, oh, everybody's worse than me. Look at this, And she comes up and she says, well, this wasn't my fault. My ex-husband did this on the first one. And my girlfriend should have drove on the second one. And this happened because I was living with my mom. And I'm like, she got an excuse for everything. And I had excuses, but I knew deep down inside I was an alcoholic. She would not admit it. I don't know what happened to her. She could have got 7 or 8 or died. And I would have been like that. So AA is what I have when I work with clients in recovery. I make sure that they go to AA or NA, or they have steps and they have an accountability partner like me, but also what's called a sponsor in AA.
Right.
You get a sponsor, they hold you responsible. You get other sponsors. You don't just need one, but everybody has to go through that and grow through it. And I see people fall off a lot. And to my spiritual awakening, 7 years into my sobriety, another part of my story is I was even homeless when I was sober in 2017, starting my business. And I made some bad decisions. I lived out of my office for 6 months. I got published in 2017 with Les Brown in a book called Living with Heart. I was co-authored with one of the top speakers in the world. I was like, I'm going to be a millionaire. I thought I was going to make all this money. And 6 months later, what Les Brown said in his talks, if you look him up, he goes, I was living out of my office. And when he was 48 years old, so at this time I was like 46, and I was living out of my office. I go, I got to be careful what you think about, you bring about. Because I kind of wanted the challenge in a weird way. The challenge in change, as I mentioned, I accepted it. I think God or the universe, everything else was just saying, try this, and it didn't work. But they kept testing me to give up or testing me to blame others. I wasn't going to do it. I said, thank you, 1,000 times every day. And I had to forgiveness. This is a quote right here. Forgiveness fuels growth through the seeds of love in which it waters daily. So I had to forgive my old self. And I like to do this analogy when I tell stories at schools. My best friend died in 2012. He had 4 DUIs. He died in jail. And they're like, oh, wow. And they hear the story. That was me. That was me in jail. And I was really awoke to the fact that these students thought, oh, you're your best friend. Like somebody literally died. No, it was actually my old self replaced by my new self. And part of, if I'll show this pictures real quick, but that was the old me passed out in an RV, and that's the new me passed out in the gym.
Yeah, move it over a little bit. There we go. Yeah, and we'll post all this stuff on our on social media for you. Yeah, so send me the pictures.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Let me ask you this,
Coach. A lot of
Coach.
people will be inspired by this. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. How do people, if someone is interested in your coaching or your book, tell us, and I'm going to put all this stuff in the YouTube page and on my social media, but how do people get a hold of you if they want to invite you maybe as a speaker to their organization?
Well, the best way too, and I'm finding this all over the world, is when people Google epilepsy life coaching, if they're an epileptic, they find me. I'm on the top, I'm on YouTube. So the main thing though is if you're just looking up, go under thankyou1000.com. And that's what my book is, thankyou1000.com. And under just Google on YouTube, Coach Stefan Rudolph, or Coach Stefan, sounds better sometimes.
Yeah.
So Coach Stefan Rudolph is there on YouTube. And then just in general, the main website is thankyou1000. And it'll lead to a link where the book is. And I'm under recovered coaching. There's a couple different areas, but I think the best way to get a hold of me for people is to listen to this book on Audible or on Spotify now. And all those links are on there.
Yeah, and I'll add him. Well, listen, this has been amazing. I know when we first spoke, you told me a little bit about your story, but it's just mind-boggling to go really from the mountaintop and the life that you had. And there are people who probably, have been there, and then to lose everything, to be practically homeless, and then to rebuild yourself is really a testament.
It's a blessing. Yeah, and I want to lead in with this because the blessing in life is sometimes the mess in life is a bless in life. The messing is blessing. And I had 2 hernia surgeries. I had a pulmonary embolism as well, a blood clot in the lungs when they were testing me for brain surgery. 4 endoscopies, which is acid reflux from drinking. 25 years of epilepsy, 25 years of alcoholism, 4 DUIs, jail, institution, by the way. I ended up in the institution in 2005 because I drank too much with medication. Homelessness. And I said, bring it on. Part of my thing is my bio moment in life is BIO, bring it on. So I said, thank you. Thank you for the lockdown. Thank you for the escapism. Thank you for the divorce, for the jail, for the homelessness, everything. People have to look at it and face it in order to erase it. And it fires me up to get to these students now in high schools, and they say, oh, a lot of blamingism going on for the years they lost in 7th grade or 8th grade. But don't blame less, gain more. So,
Correct. Yeah, I mean, here what's amazing, and we'll end this in a few minutes, but with all the stuff that you've been through, looking at you, you still look like a Hollywood movie star. So that's the best part about it.
Well, somebody said, like, my great aunt, before she passed, she goes, you look like Robert Redford. And I was
do,
like,
I know.
The last thing she said. I never had any confidence in myself. I feel like if I do the math at 52 minus 25 years of drinking plus 10 years, 11 years sober, I'm about 35. I feel like that. So, but there was a big portion of my life that I can't say I lost anymore. It's another thing for people out there to remember. You're not losing something when you go through hell. Steve Miller said it best in his song, you have to go through hell to get to heavens. Yep. And that's what I looked at. 14 years, people were like, oh, you lost that part. You should have kept the job and the money. And it's like, no, I'm here now. Tony Robbins and people like that taught me best too. It's like, follow your passion and the money will follow. Absolutely. So now, speaking events are coming in, and I was on TEDx, and I'll send you that link.
Please,
recently recorded. It's not even out yet, but TEDx was at a school, and I just want to be able to, when the water gets a little low in life, because this lake is usually pretty full, but the dam over here has been here for so many years. That's where all my drinking started, ironically. It was down here in the lake when we were kids, and this used to be all the way up here. So like in life, we can't let it get to us, because that's part of life is, the change and the shift, and The droughts we go through, how's that?
Yeah, that's good. Much better. Very good. Well, listen, it's been absolutely a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing your words and your incredible life story and your enthusiasm for life. It's so wonderful to hear. I mean, people are probably listening to this and watching this, and I know my jaw was to my shoes, but you really are an inspiration. And as I say to all my speakers, and you said it earlier, you never walk alone. And you
I like that.
literally
Yeah.
that's part of my Liverpool Football Club, which I follow. That's our anthem. You never walk alone. When the storm comes, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. So,
I love
you have
that.
really,
So I went to the school and originally
yeah,
here in Escondido called Light and Life. And the
sure.
light and life is what I talk about. So never give up. If you can look up, you can get up, is what Les Brown said. And I said, look up, get up, and grow up. So a lot of those people out there, what you're going through, take it as a blessing. And it's hard, but take it as an experience that you're going to teach your kids and other people around you. So don't ever give up.
And
That's
don't
what
make
I say here.
excuses, and don't blame
Yeah.
others.
Excuse the excuses out of your life. That's my quote.
Exactly.
So
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much. Again, thank you, Coach, for being here. Again, everyone, thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us this week. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or on your webpage at thevoicesofastranger.com. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend and subscribe to the show. Tune in next week for a new guest. Until next time, keep living life with passion and make each day count.